What if I told you that at this very moment, your soul has already been assigned to a specific spiritual realm, and most people will never discover which one they're destined for? Picture this. You're living your life, making decisions, facing challenges, growing spiritually, yet completely unaware that your consciousness is operating on a frequency that has already determined your eternal destination. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Has this ever happened to you? That feeling deep inside that there's something profound about existence that no one is talking about? Something that mainstream spiritual teachings seem to dance around but never fully explain? Well, what you're about to discover might surprise you, because buried in the archives of Virginia Beach lies perhaps the most revolutionary spiritual discovery of the modern era. Edgar Cayce, known as America's greatest psychic, spent decades in deep trance states accessing information that would fundamentally change how we understand spiritual evolution and consciousness development. Through over 14,000 meticulously documented psychic readings, Cayce unveiled a spiritual reality so profound that it's been quietly suppressed from mainstream teachings for nearly a century. But here's where it gets absolutely fascinating. In 1923, during one of his deepest trance states, something unprecedented happened. Cayce's stenographer sat frozen as his voice transformed, describing not just one spiritual realm, but 7 distinct spiritual planes where souls reside between earthly incarnations. This wasn't abstract philosophy or religious doctrine. This was detailed, practical information about the exact mechanics of spiritual consciousness and what determines which dimensional frequency your soul can access. Stay with me until the end, because what Cayce revealed about these spiritual realms will completely transform how you view your spiritual journey, and more importantly, show you exactly how to elevate your consciousness to higher dimensions while you're still alive. The implications are staggering when you realize that your current level of awareness isn't just affecting your present life, it's literally determining your spiritual destination. Think about this for a moment. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every choice you make is either raising or lowering your spiritual frequency, moving you closer to or further from these higher consciousness realms. Yet most people are completely unconscious of this process, trapped in what Cayce called the lowest spiritual frequency possible, cycling through the same patterns lifetime after lifetime without ever truly evolving. The knowledge Cayce accessed challenges everything we've been taught about spiritual progress, reincarnation, and consciousness development. These aren't feel-good, spiritual concepts designed to make us feel better about ourselves. These are universal laws that operate whether we understand them or not, determining the trajectory of our soul's eternal journey. Subscribe to stay connected as we dive deeper into these ancient spiritual mysteries that have been hidden from mainstream teachings. Your soul's evolution deserves access to this transformative knowledge. What makes this discovery even more remarkable is that Cayce didn't just describe these spiritual realms. He provided specific, practical methods for accessing higher levels of consciousness that anyone can apply immediately. The question isn't whether these spiritual laws exist, but whether you're ready to discover which realm your consciousness is currently operating from and what you can do to accelerate your transformation to higher spiritual frequencies. But here's the shocking truth that will fundamentally change your perspective on spiritual development forever. Cayce discovered that most humans are completely unconscious of operating from what he called the material consciousness realm, the lowest spiritual frequency possible. This isn't about being a bad person or lacking spiritual knowledge. This realm represents a state of consciousness so dense with ego attachment and physical desires that souls become trapped in their own spiritual prison, cycling through the same patterns for hundreds, sometimes thousands, of lifetimes. The implications of this discovery are staggering when you consider the impact on your daily decisions and life choices. Every time you prioritize material comfort over spiritual growth, every moment you choose fear over love, every decision driven by ego rather than soul purpose, you're reinforcing the energetic patterns that keep consciousness locked in this lowest dimensional frequency. The hidden truth is that most people believe they're making spiritual progress simply because they're going through the motions of human existence, yet their consciousness never actually evolves. Now, I want to go even deeper into this revelation because what Cayce witnessed during one particular reading in 1932 demonstrates just how real and terrifying this spiritual stagnation can become. A businessman came to Cayce seeking guidance, expecting perhaps some business advice or health insights. Instead, something unprecedented occurred that shook Cayce to his core. During the reading, his voice suddenly transformed into what witnesses described as an otherworldly tone, and the information that came through revealed this man's soul had been cycling through the exact same spiritual level for over 800 years. 800 years of reincarnation, 800 years of opportunities for growth and transformation. Yet this soul kept making the identical consciousness mistake in every single incarnation. The pattern was so deeply ingrained that lifetime after lifetime, the soul would incarnate, live, die, and return to the spiritual realm only to repeat the same limiting beliefs and choices that prevented any real spiritual advancement. But here's what truly unsettled everyone present, including Cayce himself. His stenographer, Gladys Davis, who had witnessed thousands of readings, later wrote that she had never seen Cayce so agitated during a session. When he emerged from the trance state, he had absolutely no memory of what he had said, yet the message was crystal clear to everyone in the room. This soul was trapped in a consciousness prison of its own making, and Cayce had just witnessed something that terrified even him. The reality that spiritual evolution isn't guaranteed simply by living multiple lifetimes. This journey into consciousness reveals that transformation isn't automatic. Behind the scenes of what we call spiritual growth lies a complex system of energetic frequencies and consciousness choices that most people never become aware of. The mindset shifts required to break free from these ancient patterns demand a level of self-awareness and commitment that goes far beyond conventional spiritual practices. This discovery completely shatters one of the most widespread misconceptions about spiritual development that has misled countless seekers for generations. Most people operate under the assumption that simply living multiple lifetimes automatically guarantees spiritual advancement. This belief creates a dangerous complacency, a spiritual laziness that assumes time alone will handle the transformation work that requires conscious effort and deliberate choices. Cayce's extensive research into the Akashic records reveals the devastating truth behind this illusion. Through his unique ability to access what he described as the cosmic library, where every soul's journey is meticulously recorded, he documented case after case of souls who had been reincarnating for millennia without ever progressing beyond the first spiritual realm. These weren't isolated incidents or rare exceptions. This pattern represented the majority of human souls cycling through physical existence. The impact of this revelation fundamentally changes how we must approach our spiritual journey. It means that every decision we make, every mindset we adopt, every response we choose in challenging moments either propels us forward or keeps us trapped in the same consciousness frequency we've been operating from, potentially for thousands of years. The hidden truth is that spiritual evolution requires intentional, conscious participation rather than passive hope that time and experience will naturally elevate our awareness. What Cayce discovered through his access to these cosmic records was a magnificent yet sobering vision of consciousness, structured in 7 towering levels, each representing distinctly different frequencies of spiritual awareness. These aren't abstract concepts or philosophical ideals. They represent actual dimensional realities where consciousness operates according to specific universal laws and energetic patterns. At the foundation of this spiritual architecture lies what Cayce termed earthbound consciousness. And here's where the journey becomes both deeply personal and universally relevant. This lowest level doesn't house evil souls or spiritually inferior beings. Instead, it contains ordinary individuals just like you and me who simply never learned the specific skills required to transcend basic human impulses and attachments. These souls create their own spiritual prison through attachment to material desires, fear-based decision-making, and ego-driven choices that feel completely natural and justified from their current perspective. The tragedy isn't that they're bad people, but that they remain unconscious of the energetic patterns keeping them bound to this frequency. They experience all the emotions, relationships, successes and failures of human life, yet their consciousness never actually transforms because they haven't developed the awareness needed to recognize and shift these deeply ingrained patterns. Behind the scenes of what appears to be normal human experience lies this invisible spiritual architecture that determines the trajectory of every soul's eternal journey. The revelations contained within Cayce's work expose the mechanics of consciousness evolution in ways that can completely revolutionize your understanding of why certain life patterns keep repeating and how to finally break free from cycles that may have been operating for centuries. The scope of this spiritual stagnation reaches back further than most people could imagine, revealing a truth so profound it challenges our entire understanding of human evolution. Among Cayce's most documented cases were souls who had been trapped in this lowest consciousness realm since the time of ancient Atlantis, over 12,000 years of existence without meaningful spiritual advancement. These aren't mythical stories or abstract concepts, but detailed readings documenting specific souls whose journey Cayce could trace across millennia. The pattern that emerged from these ancient souls was both heartbreaking and illuminating. Lifetime after lifetime, incarnation after incarnation, they consistently made the same fundamental choices that kept them spiritually imprisoned. When faced with opportunities for growth, they chose comfort. When presented with chances to expand beyond their limitations, they chose fear. When given moments to serve something greater than themselves, they chose ego gratification. The impact of these seemingly small decisions accumulated across thousands of years, creating energetic momentum so powerful that breaking free required extraordinary conscious effort. Show some love with a like if this exploration of Edgar Cayce's spiritual teachings opened new possibilities in your understanding of consciousness development and spiritual growth. What makes this phenomenon even more disturbing is that these trapped souls remain completely unconscious of their spiritual stagnation. They function like what Cayce termed spiritual zombies, going through all the motions of human experience while believing they're making genuine progress on their spiritual journey. They fall in love, build careers, raise families, face challenges, and celebrate victories. Yet their consciousness never actually evolves because they're unconsciously repeating the same fundamental patterns that have governed their choices for millennia. This revelation exposes the hidden truth behind why so many people feel stuck in repetitive life circumstances or find themselves facing the same types of relationships, financial struggles, or emotional challenges, despite years of personal development work. The surface-level decisions and actions may appear different from lifetime to lifetime, but the underlying consciousness patterns driving those choices remain unchanged. Behind the scenes of what appears to be normal spiritual seeking lies this invisible trap that keeps souls cycling through experiences without transformation. The journey toward authentic spiritual evolution requires recognizing these deeply embedded patterns and making fundamentally different choices that break the energetic momentum of thousands of years. However, Cayce didn't leave us without hope or practical guidance. In 1944, just 1 year before his death, he delivered what many consider his most important reading about consciousness evolution. When directly asked how someone could determine which spiritual realm they were operating from, Cayce revealed something that changes everything about how we can assess our own spiritual development. He explained that every human being receives constant signals about their spiritual frequency, but most people remain too distracted by material concerns and mental noise to notice these communications. These signs manifest through dreams that carry deeper meaning, sudden insights that seem to come from nowhere, inexplicable coincidences that feel too perfect to be random, and what he called soul promptings, those moments when you know something is true even though you can't logically explain why. This technique, which Cayce called the consciousness mirror, operates on a principle so elegant and accurate that he used it consistently to determine which souls were ready for advanced spiritual teachings versus those who needed foundational consciousness work. The method requires no special equipment, no lengthy meditation sessions, and no complex rituals, just honest self-observation during moments when your emotional reactions reveal the deepest truths about your spiritual frequency. The process works by using other people as mirrors that reflect your own unhealed consciousness back to you with perfect accuracy. When you encounter someone who triggers strong negative emotions, whether it's anger, jealousy, judgment, fear, or resentment, you're not actually responding to who they are as a soul. Instead, you're reacting to aspects of your own consciousness that remain unintegrated and unhealed. The intensity of your emotional reaction becomes a precise measurement of your current spiritual frequency. This revelation transforms every challenging interaction from a source of frustration into a powerful diagnostic tool for spiritual development. Behind the scenes of what appears to be interpersonal conflict lies an incredibly sophisticated feedback system that constantly shows you exactly where your consciousness needs attention and growth. The hidden truth is that the people who trigger you most intensely are actually providing you with invaluable information about your spiritual evolution. The impact of understanding this principle cannot be overstated because it means every difficult relationship, every annoying coworker, every family member who pushes your buttons is actually serving your highest spiritual development. The journey toward higher consciousness isn't about avoiding challenging people or finding more peaceful environments. It's about transforming your internal responses until you can maintain spiritual equilibrium regardless of external circumstances. Cayce identified 3 distinct reaction patterns that reveal precisely which spiritual realm your consciousness is currently accessing. When you encounter someone who triggers you, and your immediate response is anger, judgment, or the need to be right, you're operating from what he called material consciousness, the first and lowest spiritual realm. This doesn't make you a bad person. It simply indicates that your awareness is currently focused on ego protection and physical realm attachments. However, when your response shifts to include compassion mixed with understanding, recognizing that this person is struggling with their own consciousness limitations, you're accessing higher spiritual frequencies. This mindset transformation indicates that your awareness is beginning to operate from more elevated realms, where judgment gives way to wisdom and separation dissolves into connection. The highest level response, which Cayce termed Christ consciousness, occurs when you can genuinely see that triggering person as a soul, having a human experience just like yourself. From this frequency, you feel authentic love for their spiritual journey, even when their behavior challenges you. This doesn't mean becoming passive or allowing harmful treatment, but rather maintaining inner peace and genuine compassion while taking appropriate action. The precision of this consciousness assessment method was so remarkable that Cayce relied on it consistently throughout his career to make crucial decisions about spiritual guidance. When someone came seeking advanced teachings or deeper metaphysical knowledge, he would observe their reactions to various triggering scenarios and challenging situations. Those who demonstrated compassionate responses and higher consciousness reactions received profound esoteric teachings, while those still operating from ego-driven patterns were guided toward foundational spiritual work. The results were always perfectly aligned with each individual's capacity for growth and transformation. This accuracy speaks to a deeper truth about consciousness development. There are no shortcuts or ways to fake genuine spiritual evolution. Your authentic frequency reveals itself through spontaneous reactions, and those reactions create the foundation for everything else in your spiritual journey. The hidden truth is that advanced spiritual knowledge can actually become harmful if received by consciousness that isn't prepared to integrate it responsibly. What makes this even more fascinating is how Cayce's technique revealed something extraordinary about certain souls who seem to operate from naturally elevated consciousness levels. In 1936, a woman approached Cayce claiming she had lived in ancient Atlantis. Most people expected him to dismiss this as fantasy or delusion. Instead, not only did Cayce confirm her past life connection, but he revealed something that completely revolutionized understanding about consciousness and reincarnation. According to his readings, Atlantean souls had access to spiritual technologies and levels of consciousness that modern humans can barely comprehend. These weren't primitive people who happened to live in an advanced civilization. They were souls whose consciousness could interface directly with crystalline energy systems, telepathic communication networks, and dimensional portals that allowed travel between spiritual realms. Their mindset operated from frequencies so elevated that physical matter responded to conscious intention in ways that would seem like magic to contemporary understanding. The impact of this revelation extends far beyond historical curiosity because Cayce discovered that many of these advanced Atlantean souls made a conscious decision to incarnate during the period between 1900 and 2000. They didn't come back randomly or accidentally. They chose this specific time frame for a precise spiritual mission. These souls incarnated with intact memories of higher consciousness levels, carrying within their energy field the capacity to anchor elevated spiritual frequencies directly into Earth's consciousness grid. Their purpose wasn't to show off advanced abilities or claim spiritual superiority, but to serve as living bridges between the elevated consciousness levels they had previously mastered and the current stage of human evolution. Behind the scenes of what appears to be normal human existence, these souls are working to make higher spiritual frequencies more accessible to everyone, creating energetic pathways that allow other souls to evolve more rapidly than would otherwise be possible. This explains why certain people seem naturally drawn to spiritual concepts, demonstrate intuitive abilities from early childhood, or feel compelled towards service and consciousness work even when their external circumstances don't support such interests. The journey of awakening for many contemporary souls is actually the process of remembering and reactivating consciousness capabilities that were developed thousands of years ago. The presence of these advanced consciousness carriers means that some people walking among us right now are operating from spiritual frequencies that are literally thousands of years more evolved than the average human experience. They aren't here by accident or coincidence. They've incarnated during this specific period in human history because our entire planet is approaching a critical transformation point that requires their elevated consciousness to anchor new possibilities for collective evolution. If you're drawn to this deeper level of spiritual wisdom and want To continue exploring consciousness evolution together, hit that subscribe button because there's so much more profound insight from Edgar Cayce's work that can transform your spiritual journey. These souls often appear completely ordinary on the surface, working regular jobs, raising families, and navigating the same daily challenges everyone faces. However, their decision-making process operates from an entirely different spiritual framework, where most people react from ego protection and material concerns. These advanced souls consistently choose responses that serve the highest good for all involved, even when it requires personal sacrifice or discomfort. The impact of their presence creates ripple effects throughout human consciousness that extend far beyond their immediate circle of influence. Every choice they make from elevated awareness helps to establish new energetic pathways that make it easier for other souls to access higher spiritual frequencies. Behind the scenes of apparent ordinary human interactions, these souls are literally helping to rewire the collective consciousness grid that supports all spiritual evolution on Earth. What makes this discovery even more empowering is that Cayce revealed these advanced consciousness levels aren't reserved for special souls or spiritual elites. Through his extensive research into the mechanics of consciousness development, he identified 5 specific universal laws that can accelerate spiritual evolution so dramatically that any soul can move from the lowest to highest spiritual realm within a single lifetime. These aren't abstract concepts or complex rituals, but practical applications of consciousness that anyone can implement immediately. The first universal law operates on a principle so fundamental that it governs every aspect of spiritual development: service above self. However, this doesn't mean what most people think when they hear about spiritual service. Cayce meant something far more comprehensive and transformative than volunteering at charitable organizations or helping others in obvious ways. This law recognizes that every single decision you make throughout your day, from what you choose to eat for breakfast to how you respond when someone criticizes you, either serves your ego's agenda or serves your soul's evolutionary purpose. The hidden truth is that souls trapped in lower spiritual realms consistently make choices that prioritize ego gratification, comfort, maintenance, and self-protection, while evolved souls consistently choose actions that elevate consciousness even when those choices require courage, vulnerability, or temporary discomfort. The journey toward higher spiritual frequencies requires developing the awareness to recognize these choice points as they arise, and the commitment to consistently choose soul evolution over ego satisfaction. This mindset transformation doesn't happen overnight, but each conscious choice creates momentum that makes subsequent elevated choices easier and more natural. The practical application of choosing soul evolution over ego satisfaction becomes especially challenging when we encounter what Cayce identified as the biggest obstacle facing modern spiritual seekers: the dangerous illusion that material success equals spiritual advancement. This misconception has trapped countless souls who achieved financial abundance or professional recognition, only to discover that their consciousness had actually regressed during the pursuit of worldly achievements. Cayce's readings revealed a shocking pattern among successful individuals who came seeking spiritual guidance. Many souls who had accumulated significant wealth, achieved prominent social status, or built impressive careers were operating from lower spiritual frequencies than they had accessed in previous lifetimes when they lived in poverty or simplicity. The hidden truth behind this phenomenon lies in how material success can seduce consciousness away from spiritual priorities and toward ego gratification, disguised as legitimate achievement. The transformation that occurs when someone achieves material success without maintaining spiritual awareness creates a subtle but profound shift in decision-making patterns. Choices that once served soul evolution gradually become choices that serve wealth preservation, status maintenance, and ego protection. Behind the scenes of apparent success lies a consciousness that has traded spiritual advancement for material security, often without realizing the exchange has occurred. However, this doesn't mean material abundance is inherently spiritual poison or that poverty automatically equals spiritual purity. The determining factor isn't the amount of wealth you possess, but how you relate to that material success and what mindset governs your decisions about how to use those resources. When wealth serves your spiritual mission and helps elevate others' consciousness, it becomes a tool for spiritual advancement. When wealth serves ego aggrandizement and separates you from authentic connection with others, it becomes a spiritual trap that can persist across multiple lifetimes. The impact of understanding this principle extends to every aspect of how we navigate success, achievement, and material goals. Each moment of prosperity becomes an opportunity to practice the consciousness choices that either elevate or diminish spiritual frequency. The journey toward authentic abundance requires maintaining awareness of whether your relationship with material success is serving your soul's evolution or feeding patterns that keep consciousness trapped in lower realms. This awareness becomes even more crucial when we consider Cayce's second universal law, thought as creative force. Most humans remain completely unconscious of the fact that they're constantly creating their spiritual reality through the quality and direction of their thought patterns. Every single thought you think throughout the day is either raising your spiritual frequency toward higher consciousness realms or lowering it toward denser, more ego-driven states. The revelations contained within this principle completely revolutionize how we must approach mental discipline and consciousness management. Your thoughts aren't just private internal experiences with no external impact. They're creative forces that literally shape the spiritual reality you're able to access and the consciousness frequency you operate from moment to moment. If these revelations about spiritual realms and consciousness evolution resonated with something deep inside your soul, a like on this video helps this sacred wisdom reach others who are ready for this level of spiritual awakening. The sophistication required for authentic thought mastery goes far beyond what most spiritual teachings suggest, because Cayce discovered that positive thinking alone can actually become a spiritual trap that prevents consciousness evolution. This revelation challenges one of the most popular approaches to personal development and exposes a hidden truth that has kept countless souls stuck in spiritual limbo despite years of affirmations, visualization, and optimistic mindset practices. The problem isn't with positive thinking itself, but with how many souls use it as a sophisticated form of spiritual bypassing. Instead of facing their shadow aspects, unhealed traumas, and uncomfortable emotional patterns, they overlay positive thoughts like bandages covering infected wounds. Behind the scenes of apparent spiritual progress lies consciousness that has learned to avoid rather than integrate the darkness that holds the keys to genuine transformation. This avoidance strategy creates what Cayce called spiritual limbo, a state where souls believe they're evolving because they feel better temporarily, yet their fundamental consciousness patterns remain unchanged. The impact of this self-deception can persist across multiple lifetimes because the soul never actually does the deep work required to access higher spiritual realms. True consciousness evolution demands what Cayce termed purification through truth, a process that requires facing your darkness with complete honesty, accepting your human flaws without judgment, and loving yourself anyway. This isn't about wallowing in negativity or becoming obsessed with personal shortcomings. It's about developing the courage, to look directly at the aspects of yourself that you've been avoiding, rejecting, or trying to fix through positive thinking alone. The journey toward higher spiritual frequencies requires integrating rather than transcending your humanity. When you can acknowledge your capacity for fear, anger, jealousy, and selfishness without being controlled by these emotions, you develop the consciousness stability needed to access elevated spiritual realms. The transformation happens not through eliminating these aspects, but through loving yourself completely while choosing responses aligned with your highest spiritual development. This integration process becomes even more profound when you understand Cayce's third universal law, healing as spiritual service. Every aspect of yourself that you heal through honest self-acceptance and conscious integration automatically heals the same aspect in others, even people you've never met and may never encounter in physical form. This occurs because all consciousness is connected at the deepest level through what Cayce called the cosmic consciousness grid that unifies all spiritual experience. The hidden truth behind this principle revolutionizes how we understand personal spiritual work. When you heal your fear, you reduce fear in the collective human consciousness. When you integrate your anger constructively, you make it easier for others to transform their anger. When you learn to love your imperfections, you help humanity move beyond the shame patterns that keep our entire species trapped in lower spiritual frequencies. This means your personal spiritual development isn't selfish inner work. It's actually the most profound service you can offer to human evolution. Behind the scenes of your individual healing journey lies a contribution to planetary consciousness transformation that affects every soul currently incarnated and those who will incarnate in future generations. The ripple effects of your personal healing work extend far beyond what most people could imagine, creating transformation that literally reshapes the consciousness fabric of our entire planet. When you do the difficult inner work of integrating fear patterns, releasing anger constructively, or healing shame around your human imperfections, you're not just improving your own spiritual frequency, you're actively participating in the evolution of human consciousness itself. This occurs because individual consciousness operates like a tuning fork that resonates with and influences the collective frequency. Every moment you choose love over fear, forgiveness over resentment, or truth over comfortable illusion, you're pulling our entire planetary consciousness toward higher spiritual realms. The hidden truth is that personal healing becomes planetary healing through the invisible connections that link all consciousness at the deepest levels. Behind the scenes of what appears to be private spiritual work lies a contribution to collective awakening that affects every soul currently incarnated and establishes energetic pathways for future generations. The journey toward individual consciousness elevation simultaneously creates opportunities for others to access higher spiritual frequencies with greater ease than would otherwise be possible. This understanding completely transforms how we view the importance and impact of our personal spiritual development. Your willingness to face uncomfortable truths about yourself, heal generational trauma patterns, and choose elevated responses in challenging situations isn't selfish inner work. It's actually one of the most significant contributions you can make to human evolution and planetary transformation. The interconnected nature of consciousness means that every breakthrough you achieve in your spiritual development creates resonance patterns that help others achieve similar breakthroughs. When you learn to love yourself despite your flaws, you make it easier for others to practice self-acceptance. When you choose compassion, in moments when anger feels justified, you strengthen the collective capacity for forgiveness and understanding. However, among all the spiritual practices and consciousness development techniques that Cayce explored throughout his extensive research, he identified one principle that supersedes all others in determining which spiritual realm a soul can access. In 1942, just 3 years before his death, Cayce delivered What many consider his most important revelation about consciousness evolution, when he revealed that genuine forgiveness serves as the master key that unlocks every higher spiritual realm. This discovery shocked many people because it wasn't good deeds, meditation practices, spiritual knowledge, or even service to others that determined spiritual advancement. The single most important factor governing access to elevated consciousness was the capacity for authentic forgiveness, a quality so rare that Cayce encountered it in less than 1% of the souls he read for during his entire career. The transformation required to develop this level of forgiveness goes far beyond what most people practice when they think they've forgiven someone. Most forgiveness contains subtle elements of moral superiority, conditional acceptance, or suppressed resentment that actually prevents access to higher spiritual realms. The level of forgiveness that serves as this master key to spiritual realms requires what Cayce called Christ-like forgiveness, a state of consciousness that completely releases the need for anyone to be different than they are. This doesn't mean becoming passive or accepting harmful behavior without boundaries. Instead, it means recognizing that everyone is doing their best from their current level of consciousness and releasing the internal resistance that keeps you energetically connected to their choices in destructive ways. The transformation required to achieve this level of forgiveness involves seeing through what Cayce called the separation illusion, the belief that other people's actions can actually damage your spiritual essence or prevent your consciousness evolution. Behind the scenes of apparent interpersonal conflict lies a hidden truth that every challenging interaction serves your soul's development by revealing exactly where your consciousness needs to grow. This principle was demonstrated powerfully through a documented case from 1938 that shows exactly how authentic forgiveness creates quantum leaps in spiritual development. A woman came to Cayce devastated because her husband had abandoned her and their 3 children for his secretary. She was consumed with rage and wanted to know if he would be punished in his next lifetime for the pain he had caused their family. Cayce's response shocked everyone in the room because instead of validating her victim perspective or promising cosmic justice, he explained that her husband's actions were actually serving her soul's evolution in the most profound way possible. The situation was forcing her to choose between victim consciousness, which would keep her trapped in lower spiritual realms, and spiritual mastery, which would accelerate her consciousness development dramatically. The journey toward genuine forgiveness wasn't easy or quick. For 2 years, this woman worked with Cayce's guidance to transform her relationship with betrayal, abandonment, and injustice. She had to face her deepest fears about financial security, social judgment, and her capacity to raise children alone. More importantly, she had to release her attachment to being right about her husband's wrongness and her need for him to suffer consequences that would validate her pain. The impact of achieving authentic forgiveness created results that demonstrate the incredible power of this consciousness transformation. According to follow-up readings, her spiritual frequency had evolved from the 2nd spiritual realm to the 5th realm, a quantum leap that normally requires multiple lifetimes to achieve. This wasn't just emotional healing or psychological recovery. This was measurable consciousness evolution that fundamentally altered her soul's trajectory and spiritual capacity. But the most remarkable aspect of this transformation occurred 3 months after she achieved genuine forgiveness. Her ex-husband called her completely unexpectedly, describing what he called a spiritual awakening and expressing genuine remorse for his actions. He had no knowledge that she had been working on forgiveness practices, yet her consciousness shift had somehow triggered his own spiritual evolution across time and space. This demonstrates the interconnected nature of consciousness and reveals how authentic forgiveness creates ripple effects that influence everyone connected to your spiritual journey, including people from past lifetimes and future incarnations. This demonstration of consciousness interconnection reveals something even more profound about spiritual development that most people never consider. The ripple effects of authentic forgiveness extend across dimensions of time and space in ways that completely revolutionize our understanding of how consciousness evolution affects not just individual spiritual development, but the entire network of souls connected to your journey. The transformation that occurred when this woman achieved genuine forgiveness created what Cayce called consciousness resonance, a phenomenon where elevated spiritual frequency in one person automatically triggers awakening opportunities in everyone energetically connected to their soul's journey. This includes family members, romantic partners, friends, colleagues, and even souls from previous lifetimes who share karmic patterns requiring resolution. Behind the scenes of what appears to be personal spiritual work lies a vast network of consciousness connections that span multiple incarnations and dimensions. When you achieve a breakthrough in forgiveness, compassion, or any elevated consciousness state, you're literally sending spiritual upgrade signals through this network that create awakening opportunities for every soul whose journey intersects with yours. This understanding leads directly into Cayce's fourth universal law, which addresses how consciousness development fundamentally transforms your relationship with death, rebirth, and the transition between physical and spiritual dimensions. Most people think death is something that happens to them, an event they have no control over that marks the end of conscious participation in their spiritual journey. Cayce's readings reveal this belief represents a complete misunderstanding of how consciousness operates during the death transition. The hidden truth is that death becomes something you participate in consciously based on your current level of spiritual development. Souls who have developed higher consciousness through practices like authentic forgiveness, service above self, and thought mastery can actually choose their death experience, remain fully aware during the transition process, and even guide their own reincarnation journey with conscious intention. This represents one of the most empowering revelations in all of Cayce's work, because it means that every moment you spend developing elevated consciousness is literally preparing you for conscious death and intentional rebirth. The decisions you make today about forgiveness, service, and spiritual development determine not just your current life experience, but your capacity to navigate future incarnations with awareness and purpose. However, souls operating from lower spiritual realms experience death as trauma and confusion, often not even realizing they've died and spending decades in what Cayce called earthbound states, stuck between physical and spiritual dimensions, because their consciousness density prevents access to higher realms. The impact of understanding this principle extends to every aspect of how you approach spiritual development, because you're not just improving your current circumstances, but preparing for the ultimate transition that every soul must navigate. The demonstration of consciousness ripple effects in this forgiveness case reveals something that fundamentally changes how we understand the interconnected nature of spiritual evolution. When this woman achieved authentic forgiveness, she wasn't just healing her own emotional wounds or improving her personal spiritual frequency. She was literally transmitting upgraded consciousness patterns through invisible networks that connected her to every soul sharing similar karmic lessons, including her ex-husband, who experienced his spontaneous awakening 3 months later. This transformation illustrates how individual consciousness development creates what Cayce called spiritual upgrade signals that travel instantaneously across time and space to influence connected souls. Behind the scenes of apparent personal healing work lies a sophisticated communication system that allows elevated consciousness in one person to trigger awakening opportunities in others, even when they have no physical contact or awareness of each other's spiritual practices. The impact of understanding this principle extends far beyond personal motivation for spiritual growth because it reveals that your consciousness development literally serves as a catalyst for collective human evolution. Every breakthrough in forgiveness, compassion, or spiritual awareness you achieve sends resonance patterns through the cosmic consciousness grid that makes similar breakthroughs easier for others to access. This interconnected nature of consciousness becomes even more significant when we consider how spiritual development affects the death transition experience. The fourth universal law that Cayce revealed completely transforms traditional understanding of death by showing that your current consciousness level determines whether you experience death as conscious participation or unconscious trauma. Souls who have developed higher spiritual frequencies through practices like authentic forgiveness and service above self can actually orchestrate their death experience with the same intentionality they brought to life decisions. They remain fully aware during the transition, maintain their memories and personality structure, and can even choose optimal timing and circumstances for their next incarnation based on their soul's evolutionary needs. However, souls operating from lower spiritual realms face a dramatically different death experience, characterized by confusion, disorientation, and what Cayce called earthbound stagnation. These souls often don't realize they've died and may spend decades stuck between physical and spiritual dimensions because their consciousness density prevents access to higher realms where conscious rebirth planning occurs. The hidden truth behind this phenomenon is that consciousness preparation for death transition isn't something you can postpone until the end of life. The spiritual frequency you develop through daily choices about forgiveness, service, and elevated thinking determines your capacity to navigate the death experience consciously and participate intentionally in your soul's ongoing evolution. This preparation becomes even more crucial when you understand Cayce's fifth and final universal law, which reveals that souls operating from elevated consciousness can access what he called eternal now awareness, a state where past, present, and future exist simultaneously, allowing complete transcendence of linear time limitations. The mastery of eternal now consciousness represents the pinnacle of spiritual development that Cayce encountered in his most advanced readings. When consciousness evolves to this frequency, the illusion of linear time dissolves completely, allowing simultaneous access to past experiences, present awareness, and future possibilities. This isn't abstract mystical philosophy. It's a practical state of consciousness that frees you from the emotional imprisonment of past regrets and future anxieties that trap most humans in lower spiritual realms. The transformation that occurs when you develop this time transcendence creates access to infinite creative power that exists only in the present moment. Behind the scenes of apparent linear experience lies a timeless reality where all possibilities exist simultaneously, waiting for consciousness to align with elevated frequencies that can perceive and interact with this eternal dimension. Cayce demonstrated this consciousness himself during his psychic readings, accessing information from any time period, seeing probable futures, and even communicating with souls who had never taken physical form. This wasn't a special gift he was born with. It was a level of consciousness he developed through consistent application of the same spiritual laws he shared with others. However, the most revolutionary revelation from Cayce's work addresses the fundamental purpose behind human incarnation on Earth. In 1943, he delivered a reading that completely transformed understanding about spiritual evolution by revealing that we're not here to escape the physical realm or transcend human experience. Instead, our mission is to bring heaven to earth by anchoring higher consciousness in physical form, evolving humanity itself rather than abandoning it for supposedly superior spiritual dimensions. This discovery changes everything about how we approach spiritual development because it means the goal isn't to become so spiritually advanced that we no longer need physical incarnation. The journey toward higher consciousness serves the purpose of creating new templates for human potential that make elevated awareness more accessible for future generations. The impact of this understanding becomes even more significant when we consider Cayce's prediction about collective human consciousness evolution. He foresaw that by 2012, enough individual souls would achieve higher consciousness that humanity as a whole would begin operating from elevated spiritual frequencies. Looking at current generational patterns, we can see evidence that his prediction was accurate. Children born after this consciousness shift period demonstrate natural access to psychic abilities, deeper spiritual wisdom, and intuitive understanding of their soul's purpose that previous generations had to develop through years of spiritual practice. These souls aren't interested in the same material pursuits that drove earlier generations. They're naturally drawn to consciousness exploration, environmental healing, and authentic spiritual connection. The mindset these young souls embody represents the future of human consciousness, and their presence among us creates opportunities for everyone to access elevated spiritual frequencies more easily than ever before in human history. Their very existence serves as proof that collective consciousness evolution is accelerating dramatically. This simple yet profound practice that Cayce developed represents the culmination of everything we've explored together about consciousness evolution and spiritual realm access. Every night before sleep, ask your soul to show you one specific way you can serve love more completely the following day. Then pay attention to the opportunities that present themselves. This technique works because it aligns your conscious mind with your soul's evolutionary impulse, creating the momentum needed to accelerate spiritual development exponentially. The beauty of this practice lies in its simplicity and immediate applicability. You don't need years of meditation training or complex spiritual knowledge to begin transforming your consciousness frequency. You just need the willingness to serve love more authentically each day and the awareness to recognize when those opportunities arise. What we've covered today represents just the beginning of understanding how consciousness evolution actually works and how you can actively participate in elevating your spiritual frequency. The techniques, principles, and revelations from Cayce's readings offer a complete roadmap for anyone ready to move beyond spiritual stagnation and access the higher realms of consciousness that most people never discover. If this resonates with your spiritual journey and you found value in these insights, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel because there's so much more profound wisdom to explore together. The depth of Cayce's work contains answers to questions about spiritual development that most people spend lifetimes searching for, and I'm committed to sharing these revelations in ways that make them practical and applicable for your daily spiritual practice. Let me know you made it all the way through this exploration by writing "This message was meant for me" in the comments. It always amazes me to connect with souls who are ready to receive this level of spiritual insight, and your presence here isn't accidental. If this content created the kind of connection that makes spiritual learning feel both profound and accessible, a like on the video helps ensure this wisdom reaches other seekers who are ready for these revelations about consciousness evolution. There's a video right here that dives even deeper into the practical applications of Edgar Cayce's spiritual techniques for modern consciousness development. Click and continue with me over there because the journey into higher spiritual realms is just beginning, and the next insights might be exactly what your soul needs to hear right now.